We are here with Richard Westoby from San Diego Fertility.
Hey.
I'm going to wait till a few people join. And I wanted to say to everybody that if you wanted to ask questions, please put them in the chat box. And we will take questions for when and Richard can open them. No questions yet. I have lots of questions for you, Richard. I'll briefly to introduce Richard, who is the patient advocate for San Diego Fertility Center, lives in the UK, is a dad through surrogacy, and he's the perfect person to talk about becoming a dad through surrogacy because he wrote this amazing book, Our Journey, One Couple's Guide to US Surrogacy. And so Richard, tell us, I know how you got into this field, but tell us about the book and where, what's your life like right now as a dad?
Like if you hold the book up.
Oh yeah, yep.
Those are my kids. So that's my son and my daughter.
Oh.
When they were literally 24 hours old.
Oh, they're gorgeous.
Yeah, I know, exactly. So they're the reason I do this. So I as you just said, I live in the UK, I live in London. And I worked in finance for many, many years, which is how I could afford surrogacy. And when my husband and I went through the process, we figured it out as we were going, right? We had an agency that was helping us, and we had different people that were helping us, but actually I felt that a lot of people didn't necessarily give me impartial advice. They told me what they wanted me to hear, not the whole decision tree from the outset. So that's how the book came about. I wrote my kids a diary on the decisions we made. And then my husband was like, this is really valuable info. You need to do something with this. So hence the book. But yeah, so I work for the San Diego Fertility Center. Obviously they're in San Diego, I'm in London. My job really is to help intended parents to navigate the process. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a dad. That's my job, right? I'm a dad. And a lot of the information that I've learned over the past 7 years, because my kids unfortunately don't look like that anymore. They're 7.5. I mean, they're
wow.
Yeah, I mean, where does that time go? And a lot of what I do is help intended parents from Europe predominantly navigate surrogacy, because in the US, surrogacy is known, it's legal, it's codified. I mean, everybody understands the process. In Europe, it's not. In a lot of countries, actually going through the process is illegal in the country. But for example, if you go to Hong Kong, going through commercial surrogacy internationally is technically illegal too. Right. So I help all of those clients outside of the United States and inside the United States, basically anywhere, to just be here and help answer those questions that you kind of sometimes feel a bit stupid asking. You're like, I've just had this amazing call with a doctor, and I didn't understand what he meant by PGT, or when he said double embryo transfer, or, the things that we as professionals take for granted, lay people don't understand.
However, I have been an intended parent also. I've gone through the IVF process, and there's so many things that are new. And when you're sort of told that this is what you need to do, or this is what you want to do, and you're allowed to do it, it's so hard to know where to start. And that's a lot of, when we're talking, we have the same conversations with intended parents is, all those basic things, like, what do I do first? And I think it's so important, the work you do, because again, as you said, people don't, what do you do first? So where do you start?
And it's the unknown unknowns, right? We know what people are supposed to be doing, but as an intended parent, as you're starting, you're kind of like, what am I supposed to know now? What am I supposed to do now? And a lot of what we do is guide people through that. Yeah.
Do you think that also surrogacy in the US is, we only hear about surrogacy through the press and a celebrity used a surrogate. It's a very different world out there. It sometimes gets a bad rap. It is a business. There's agencies that are doing this as a business, and clinics and donor agencies. So, how do you advise people? What do you tell them to start doing?
Well, exactly as you have just said, right? This is a for-profit business, right? This is people are not altruistic. At the end of the day, people are here to make money. And I really do believe that if you're okay with that, then actually that's okay, right? As a professional, if you're explaining what you're doing, you're open and transparent about the fees that people are paying, or the services they're getting on the back of that, that's okay. I think the bit that really gets people and gets me is when, oh, this is going to cost you $10,000. And then at the end of the day, you spent 20 because there's an add-on here and an add-on there and an add-on and an add-on. And you're like, hang on a sec, how did that happen? That's what a lot of my clients end up, if they've started the process and then they come to me, it's almost like I have to unravel that and then start again. And a lot of what I tell people is whenever anybody tells you, oh, you've got to do this, think three things. One is it better for me? Is it better for them? Or is it going to cost me more money? Ultimately, right? And as long as every decision that you're asked to make, you can kind of think, okay, why is this? What is the outcome going to be? And that comes back to what I was saying about that decision tree. If you can start here and you've got your decision trees and they do all these different things, at the beginning of the day, if you've got that whole thing laid out for you, you can do it so you end up where you want to be. You're not going to end up down here. And that's a lot of what we do.
Yeah, and it's a step-by-step process. And I think, so if somebody says to you, so what do I do first? What's the first thing to do? I know I need, okay, we know that for me.
Yeah, of course, exactly.
But like, do you find an attorney? Do you find a surrogacy agency? You need a donor. A lot of people come to us and they've already got an agency, or they're working with an agency, or they've paid money to an agency, but they have nothing. So what would you advise somebody? Do they start with a clinic, for instance?
Well, so my advice is, it depends on the intended parent, because some people need an intermediary, somebody who's going to hold their hand from start to finish and make sure that they are guided through every step of the way. And some people want to delegate that to a specific person. And there are consultants who will do that, right? And that is a perfectly good way of doing things if that works for you. I always say to people, okay, well, let's think about this from a financial perspective. Because I've helped super rich, famous people. I've done that, right? They don't really, well, bizarrely, some of them do care, but most of them are just like, yeah, just get on with it. That's not the majority of our clients. The majority of our clients, people like me, like I'm going to be paying for my kids for 30 years because I mortgaged my house again to basically, pay for the process. So the majority of my people are people who work super hard to get to the point where they can afford to have a family. And unfortunately, it's the reality. It's an expensive business.
Or remortgaged, sold their house.
Or remortgaged, and
yeah,
one of my clients has taken 3 jobs to do this. Yeah. So, I'm very conscious of the fact that a lot of people are sacrificing a lot to do this, and this is their dream. So when I'm looking at this process, I'm like, okay, well, let's think about this from a financial perspective. If you have signed up with a surrogacy agency, you're going to be paying non-refundable fees to the agency. You're going to be paying fees to that person upfront, but you haven't even started the process yet. So I always say to people, if you start with your clinic and the donor first, you can in effect get to the point where you've got your embryos frozen out of the clinic without even having thought about the surrogate part yet. And you could in effect stop. You can go, right, okay, I've just spent $50,000 plus 60, whatever it is going to be. And, I need a breather. I need to just hold fire for a sec, figure out my finances. I know the total is going to be $150,000, $180,000, but from a psychological perspective, I've stopped and then I'm going to restart, because frozen embryos can stay frozen for 15 years. I mean, a long time.
That's exactly how we approach it too. We start with the donor, searching for the donor, get the embryos ready, because then they're in a position to be matched fairly quickly with a surrogate too. And the surrogates are like, oh yeah, they're ready to go. The agency knows and it also is good for doing it step by step, because it's better, as you said, it's better for your mental health to take it one step at a time.
Oh my God, it really is, because it's super overwhelming otherwise. And a lot of people really, I mean, there are some agencies I work with who won't even look at an intended parent until they've got embryos. And actually, I kind of agree with that, because to your point, right, there are surrogates who are sitting, they want to get going, they want to match with a couple. If they match with a couple and they have to wait for 6 months, it's really boring. They're like,
and then, as you say, the embryo quality, what you're working with.
Everything.
So
exactly. And also, if you want to do the pre-implantation genetic testing, so PGT, which is where you've grown your embryo to day 5, and then you do a biopsy, and that biopsy tells you the number of chromosomes. It doesn't tell you anything more, just the number of chromosomes. Also, if it's a boy or a girl. If you want to do that, technically, you're then going to have to freeze your embryos, wait for a few days to get the results. So you can't do a fresh transfer if you're doing that. So again, a lot of my clients who just want to know that their embryos are chromosomally normal, they're like, okay, fine. I mean, it doesn't, and this is actually something that I think is very important to understand. Having a chromosomally normal embryo does not guarantee you're not going to have a miscarriage. A lot of people think, oh, I'm going to do this test and I'm guaranteed a baby. Unfortunately, you're not. I mean, theoretically, first trimester, the majority of miscarriages happen because there's a chromosomal abnormality. But even if we screen out those abnormal embryos, you can still have a miscarriage. So just, that's one thing that a lot of people always ask me about, and I just want to make sure.
I would say too, when you look at it as a step-by-step process, you can deal with all the very likely things that can not go according to plan. So, and deal with those things, logically. So for instance, you choose a donor and she doesn't pass the medical screening, then you have to start again. And a lot of people, if you've got all these other things, the surrogate waiting, it can put a lot of pressure on everybody. So
exactly. And that's why I think when looking at donors, it really does sometimes benefit you to look at those agencies that do that pre-screening. It's very, very few and far between that do, because obviously there's an out-of-pocket expense that the agency is going to incur. But if they've done the medical screening, they've done the genetic screening, they've done the psych eval, all of those different bits and pieces, well, technically, that donor's then going to move forward, which is great, right? But very few do that. Very
few. In fact, I think maybe only 2. And tell me about San Diego Fertility's in-house donor program, because that's another way of saving some money.
Saving costs, exactly. Yeah. So most of the top tier IVF clinics have got an in-house egg donor program, and they will do all of that screening in advance. If a donor comes from an in-house egg donor database, for example, ours is eggdonors.com, you're not paying an agency fee in addition. It's part and parcel of the added value of the clinic, right? Now, they've done their genetics, they've done their psych eval, they've done their medical, so that they're going to move forward. They typically live very close to the clinic too, so you're not paying a daily stipend, you're not paying travel, you're not paying hotels. So we always recommend people to look at that first, right? However, you also have to think that, San Diego is a great city, but it's not Boston. You don't have BU, you don't have Harvard, you don't have MIT. The caliber of education isn't necessarily what some of our clients want. So that's fine, right? Again, it's all about choices and making the right choices for you. So look in the clinic. If you don't find somebody there, that's fine. Then go and look at the agencies or come to Donor Concierge, and they'll help you kind of navigate what you want and narrow down the field to find that donor for you. Because it's technically included in the price. So start there, it's free in effect. I think a lot of what we do with our donors is we get to know them. They come into the clinic, they meet the donor team. They're not treated like a commodity, they're treated like people. And that goes a really long way. It goes a really long way. And what's great is also, you can then talk to the donor team, or you can talk to the doctors and say, hey, my donor came in today. And they're like, oh my God, she was amazing and she was really funny. And so you can kind of get a sense of that personality, which you don't necessarily sometimes get otherwise.
Do people get to meet their donors at all? No.
They don't, no. And this is something that we're working on, and I've been trying to get, is even like videos or something. Can we put something online? We don't have that as yet, no.
We do have, I have to say, for our clients, a lot of people want to meet their donors, and it's such a personal thing. If the donor wants to meet, if the agency will facilitate it, it's important that people don't think that it's a job interview. This isn't a job interview. It's not being a donor is not a job, right?
No, it really isn't.
And I think So how did you choose your donor when you were looking for a donor?
So we went through probably over 1,000 profiles. It was insane.
Gosh.
I know, it was insane. So the way that we did it was we actually went through multiple different agencies and all these different things. And I looked at a bunch, my husband looked at a bunch, and we kind of made notes of the ones we liked. And then we compared the notes of the ones that we liked. And if we both liked them, they moved to the next stage and then the next stage. And then we narrowed it down. For me, one of the really important things was actually having some form of anonymized call with the donor. And we ended up talking to two. One who was amazing, like beautiful, smart, intelligent. She was studying for a PhD in underwater molecular biology and da, da, da. You know, I'm pretty high maintenance, and openly, I mean, it is. You ask my husband, the poor man, and so was she. And that came through from the call, and we just got off the call, and I was just like, oh my God, can you imagine if we procreate that child? I dread to think.
You can't predict those things. Let's be honest.
You can't.
But it's about feeling, it's about feeling comfortable with someone based on, and it's so different for every family. Like we've had clients that wanted to find somebody who was a mountain biker or an environmentalist,
right.
or you know,
exactly,
highly academic. So it's so personal.
It's so personal. And then the next donor that we spoke to, we just had the most amazing gut feel. And within 2 seconds, I remember looking at Steve and I was just like, you know, she looked like some of his nieces. She was super kind. She was just presented really well. She just came across like a very kind, thoughtful, caring person. And for us, I was like, done.
Amazing.
And that, I think, is something that we override a lot in our lives, in every aspect of our life. We overthink things and our brain overrules our gut instinct. And you know what? She was, and to this day, we're still in touch with her, is just an amazing human being. I mean, donors are amazing human beings, full stop, for giving, you know, this amazing gift to give me a family. I mean, basically, it's like, so yeah, but that was, you know, another top tip from me is follow that gut instinct. If you get the warm and fuzzies, go with it.
What when for thinking about male couples, what are the conversations that you should have with your partner before you embark on this? Because there's a lot of decisions that you have to make. So you talked about,
you really want to do this? I mean, and I'm serious.
I think that's the same for every couple, not male couples, right? and singles as well. Let's be honest.
Let's be honest. It changes your relationship 100%. It changes your life 100%. And I think, you know, if we look at our life pre-kids to post-kids, they are so very different. And it's almost like in a parallel universe, you know, pre-kids, we were running alongside all of our friends who had kids, and it was just a totally different thing. We didn't even understand the concept. And now that we've got children, it's just like your priorities change. Everything changes. And not in a bad or in a good way, just change. And I think you really need to understand that. And one of another top tip is go and talk to a couples counselor when you're in a good place. Like when your relationship is rosy, when you're thinking that life is amazing and you're like, wow, let's have kids, it's going to be fantastic. Because actually you then get away from the stigma of we're doing this because we're in a problem and I hate you now and all these different things. Because there are times when you have no sleep, they're sick, they're upset, they're whatever it is, and you're worn. It's children can be a bit relentless.
Yes, absolutely.
And especially when they're little, there's nothing given back. It's you are giving your everything to keep this little thing alive, and you don't know what you're doing. And that is the time when it's great to be able to say and go to that person, and they'll remind you of all the stuff that you liked your husband for or a partner for, or if you're on your own, you know, they will give you the tips to be able to get through it, because it does change, right? I think communication is key at every stage of everything. If you need to talk things through. Children can be taxing. You know?
Yes. What about the practical issues of, you know, who's going to be the sperm contributor if you're two men?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and that's a really great question, because actually, from a cost perspective, if you are creating embryos and you think, actually, you know, some of my couples are like, we want one baby, that's it. I'm like, okay, well, who's going to provide the sperm? Oh, we don't know yet. Well, that's a conversation you need to have. Because if you think you're going to have one baby and then maybe you're going to have a baby in the future, what you need to do is both provide sperm at the beginning and create embryos at the beginning. Because by doing that, in effect, you are reducing your costs. Because if one does one now and then one does one in 2 or 3 years' time, that's a whole nother round of IVF. You're going to pay the clinic double, right? If you do it at the same time, you're just paying the extra sperm provider.
Plus, you would have to find a different donor as well if you're possibly.
Well, exactly. So if you do it at the same time, you're guaranteeing it's the same donor, because we don't know in 2 or 3 years' time if that donor is going to be available or not. Exactly.
And those are really important discussions. And you know, most clinics are only doing single embryo transfer. So, you know, a double embryo transfer, meaning for a twin pregnancy, is considered very high risk. And I don't know many doctors that do that. I would. Well, you had twins, but it is a high risk pregnancy. So
it is.
We usually suggest that people think about, you know, ahead of time doing single embryo transfer and doing 2 journeys. And that sounds overwhelmingly expensive, but it's safer for everybody involved. So.
Well, it is. I mean, for American intended parents, obviously you don't have when your child is born, it goes onto your health insurance policy. For international intended parents, that's a problem. You can't do that. So from a financial perspective, having one baby now and one in the future could end up actually being cheaper than having twins in the NICU for 3 months.
Exactly. And for the children, you know, the problems that come out of a birth, twin birth.
Absolutely. And also for the US intended parents, you know, from an emotional perspective, right, we know when the embryos are going in. We don't know when those children are coming out. It could be at 28 weeks, it could be at 37 weeks, it could be at 20 weeks. It's anywhere on that spectrum. And you know, we have the most amazing jobs in as much as we make dreams come true. We really do. However, what happens when that dream turns into a nightmare? When you have twins born at 24 weeks and they die. I don't want to be the Debbie Downer, but that's a reality. And I've had this happen. I've had twins where one has died, one has survived. I've had twins when they've been born. I've had twins that are now severely mentally handicapped because they were born so early. But then I've also had multiple twins born that have been totally fine. You know, we as professionals can give you statistics and say, you know, 50% of the time it's going to be this, 20% of the time it's going to be that. The reality is that's our statistic. When it happens to you, it's your 100%. It's your everything. And that's the part that's the hardest. And especially for us, when we've counseled you through it, we've got, you know, you like, no, we're adults, we're going to make our own decisions. We're like, okay, we'll support you. And then this happens and we're like,
okay. Thinking about the people and the team that you need, especially international clients, attorneys. What do you think?
Yeah, super important. So I always say to people, for international and domestic, right, talk to your attorney right at the outset. If you have an attorney that can work throughout the United States, typically they'll have the bar in one state, and then they'll have of counsel, which means they then work with other people. That's going to be good, but it's not a necessity. Typically, the where your surrogate is based is where your attorney is going to be, because they can represent you in court, they can do all those different bits and pieces. They're also, it's almost like, if you think of the process, you've got the IVF part, then you've got the surrogacy part. Above all of that, you've got the legal part, because your lawyer is going to be able to help you with your egg donor. They can represent you on that part of the contract. They're going to be able to help you with your surrogates. And then after your children are born, they're going to be doing all the court process all beforehand. one of the good things about using a California clinic, so the SDFC, is if you do the embryo transfer at SDFC, you can technically transport California law to other states through a reciprocity agreement. It's not in every state, but that means that if you're in a post-birth state, you can technically get a pre-birth order under California law. So that's just something to think about.
So we should clarify there. Every state has different laws regarding surrogacy. Some of them we call them green light states, cautionary. It depends on your marital status. It can depend on the county where the hospital is, all those things. California, people flock to California because it's known as a place where surrogacy laws are very favorable for intended parents. But there's other states too, Florida's good for certain intended parents, Texas, it is possible to do surrogacy in other states too.
Exactly. And that's part and parcel of why you talk to the attorney, is to understand the state law. Because if you think about it, California is probably the most expensive place to live in the US. And commensurate to that, your surrogates are going to be more expensive. The cost of living is going to be more expensive. So if you're cost conscious, and who isn't, if you're comparing a surrogate from Idaho or Utah, well, she may be less expensive than a surrogate in California. But then you've got to think, okay, well, am I going to have to fly her in? Am I going to have to pay for all of that? Is she going to have to do a lot of the pre-transfer work where she lives, which is called outside monitoring? You pay for that. So it's a balancing act of figuring out what that cost is going to be versus having somebody local to the clinic. And if they're equaling out, well, then that's great. But if there's still a disparity, then you know where you're going to have your surrogate.
And what do you say, how do you answer the question of how much does this all cost? Because that's probably the first question somebody asks us.
Absolutely. I think it depends on the variables. I say to people, in your head, think between $150,000 and $180,000. But the variables are going to be, you're going to have twins. Has your surrogate carried before? Has your egg donor given eggs before? Has she done a donation before? Are you choosing a full service whole hog agency where they're going to hold your hand right the way through and do everything for you, versus a smaller agency who is not going to do maybe as much? The variables are huge. I mean, more so within the surrogacy process and within the IVF clinics, because the IVF clinics basically are you going to be doing their guarantee program, i.e. you're going to have a live baby or not? Do you want to do PGT? So do you want to do the embryo biopsy? And the cost of your egg donor. That's the variables realistically within a clinic. But within an agency and on the surrogacy front, has she done it before? Where does she live? Bed rest, cesarean. The list goes on and on and on. And
the contract actually provides for all those eventualities if they happen. So, one thing about compensation I would add too is surrogates and egg donors set their own compensation. Mm-hmm. And people say, oh, well, the agency must tell them. I don't think they do. The agencies, the surrogates, and as you say, in California, surrogates generally get paid, are compensated a lot higher because there's a lot of people coming here. But if you go to somewhere like Idaho, they don't ask for as much because of the cost of living. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So if you're an international patient, or you're somebody who wants to get started with you, what's the first step then?
Well, kind of going back to the question that you asked a second ago, talk to a local lawyer, because you need to understand how you're going to get home and how you're going to be recognized as a parent to your child. Because in the United States, you will be recognized as a parent, but there may be a difference between what the US recognizes and what UK or France or Spain or Germany or whatever country it is that you live in, what the process is. So that would be the first thing I would do. And if you don't know any lawyers locally, give us a call. We can walk you through who's who. Then it would be figuring out sperm, right? You're going to have to do a sperm test, make sure you've got sperm. You're going to have to do STD testing to make sure you have no STDs. We've got a mechanism in place whereby in Europe and, for example, in Australia and Hong Kong, you can freeze your sperm locally and ship it to the United States, so that when things like travel bans happen, we can still move you forward on your process. Because normally what would happen is you would fly to the States, you'd go to the clinic, you'd meet the doctor, you'd meet the team, you'd meet everybody, you'd leave your sperm, they'd freeze it. And then once you found your egg donor, they'd create the embryos that way. But obviously at the moment, nobody can travel. So we're doing that. Do your sperm, find your egg donor. That, as I said, you can either do it through the clinic, through an agency, through donor concierge. You can do it through a family friend. You know, however you find a donor, you find a donor. Create your embryos, you freeze your embryos, and then find your surrogates. I think a lot of what my international intended parents struggle with is they're like, okay, well, where is my surrogate going to live? I'm like, we don't know until you find her, because it could be that she's, again, so if you're working with an agency that is pan-US, she could be in any state.
Right.
And
it's a very virtual industry, isn't it? You know, agencies may be located in Seattle, but their surrogates might live in Florida or, you know, Virginia or all these different places.
Correct. And I think one of the things that the smaller agencies do that the larger agencies can't do, the smaller agencies typically find surrogates that live close to where they live. And those are typically close to the clinics they prefer to work with. So at SDFC, what we'll find is a lot of surrogacy agencies in Southern California, there are 3, 4, 5 people in the agency, they will come to the clinic with the surrogate. They act as your eyes and ears. Right. And that's their USP, right? They're the way they're selling their services, I'm going to be there at every step of the way with you and your surrogate. The larger agencies don't necessarily do that, but they provide different services in different ways. So this comes back to one of the things that we were talking about before, which is, what do you want in your process? Do you want that or not? Because if you do, then you're starting to make that decision of smaller versus larger agency or not. Like our surrogate never met anybody from the agency. Nobody. She did everything on her own. And, you know, it is what it is. So I think, again, it also depends on the surrogate. Are they very self-reliant? Can they do stuff? Can they be trusted to follow medications and follow instructions? And
so, you know, here's another question that we get a lot is, what exactly does the agency do? So if your surrogate didn't even meet them, so what did they do to get to create that match with you? So
they do, that's a great question. A lot of agencies, what they'll do is they'll do a lot of the background checks. They'll do all of the pre-work, making sure that the surrogate is somebody who can be trusted. They've done the background checks, their financial checks, that they will follow instructions, that they are, of sound mind. They then provide them support throughout the journey. So they provide, some of them do surrogate retreats, some of them have monthly catch-ups, some of them are there, around the corner. They go with them to different meetings and they're there to hold their hand. I think a lot of what agencies also do is they act as the barrier when us as intended parents are going crazy because we don't know what's going on. This is our first pregnancy. We're like, have you been to McDonald's? Oh my God, what, oh my God, what? Things like that. And they're like, you know what, love, just calm down a little bit. Yeah. Calm down. She's been pregnant before. She knows what she's doing. Just chill.
These are women who like to be pregnant and are good at, having babies. So.
They know what they're doing. So shush. I always remember our obstetrician gynecologist said the person who delivered our babies was actually a friend of a friend. And I remember I sent this email once and she just replied and went, will you shut up? I was just like, but I don't know if she's exercising and walking and doing all, and literally Patty was like, stop, shut up, stop. Right. I was like, and sometimes that's the role of the agency, is just to tell you to stop. They act as the buffer.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's the same from the surrogate perspective, right? If they're getting frustrated, they need to be able to rant to somebody who can then step in impartially and go, Richard, yeah, she's good. She's good. Maybe don't call her every day, or, whatever it is.
Yeah, but aren't these are all things that we always talk to people about before you can even make a match. These are the things you need to think about. How much contact do you want with the surrogate? Do you want to have daily updates? But you have to be very open and honest about that. Do you want to go to every appointment? Do you want to have, if you can't get to the appointments, do you expect that she would send you a video, or take a little video? Those are the sorts of things that it's so important to get that information, those decisions cleared up before you even match with somebody, because you don't want to have those conflicts. Absolutely.
No, and that's the role of the agency. And I think a lot of what we do as well is firefighting, right? Sometimes an intended parent will come to us and say, I'm having this issue with my agency, can you help? And I'm like, sure. And you kind of jump in, and because we know the owners and we know the people who run the process, and we can do it in a way that helps people over that hurdle.
And good agencies, you touched on it, but for us, a good agency will have done a background check, a criminal background check on the surrogate and anyone over the age of 18 in her household. They will have done a psych evaluation. They will make sure that she's financially stable, because she can't be doing this under financial duress. So those are the things that make a good agency. And it's always so important, I think, to ask them, which clinics have you worked with? Which attorneys wrote your contracts? Let me talk to them. Do your homework. If you're going to do this on your own, I think it's so important to do your homework. And I like something you have in your book, which is a good question to ask an agency when talking about their staff is, what is their average staff turnover? Interesting. I like that, because you want to be with one person. You want to have some continuity, right?
We had 3 case coordinators.
Yeah.
3. And that meant that, looking back on it, it was fine. Now, kind of thinking about the process and knowing what I know. But in the middle of the process, it was like, what? Who are you? And of course, the information flow wasn't there, which then meant that there were multiple problems, which then meant, we had problems with our birth certificates. We then had problems with the insurance wasn't done properly, and that continuity for me is something that I think is really key, because to your point, right, you're probably with an agency for maybe 2 years, and you want that person to know who you are and to know what you've spoken about and to be able to follow through with what they've said they're going to do.
Right, exactly. And also, exactly, that continuity is so important. So I'm just aware of the time, because we could chat all day.
Oh my God, couldn't we just?
What is the biggest hurdle? That was one of my questions. Biggest hurdle that men who want to go through surrogacy face? Say it's a single. We didn't talk about single men, because we actually
spoke about single, yeah.
We have a lot of single
or HIV
men,
positive.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Let's talk about that then.
Well, yeah, I think I've got a lot of single men that are going through this process, and in fact, what I do is I always put them in touch with other single guys, not matchmaking them, but I'm putting people who are single dads in touch with people who want to go through, so they can talk through the process. So, I'm married. I've got a support network. They don't, and I think a lot of it, whenever I've got a single man who's like, I want to have twins, I'm like, you're crazy. You're crazy. But that's your choice, whatever. Invariably, they don't. But it's hard, because you are everything. You are everything in this process, and there is nobody to help delegate away from that. So if I can help put you in touch with other single guys, that's what I'm going to do, and they will help you navigate. And actually, in fact, the great thing in London, there's now a group of single dads who just are hanging out and doing stuff together because they're single.
There's a lot of good support networks, definitely.
There's a lot of huge support networks. And it's the same with HIV positive. Being HIV positive is not a problem in the surrogacy world, in as much as you can go through the sperm washing process. It's financially more, it's about $10,000 extra, but it means that in effect, what's going to happen is you go to a clinic we use a clinic in Boston, you go to clinic, they wash your sperm, and then that is then shipped to your IVF clinic. Now, the only stumbling block with that is that you have to then disclose that to your surrogates. We will never do that, because that's your call. You have to do that. We won't do a transfer without the surrogate knowing, because she has to sign some documentation to it. But that's something, again, that's something that the agency will be facilitating. They'll be walking you through the process, making sure that the surrogate understands. I believe there's never been a transmission through this process.
And it's been happening since the early 90s, I think. the sperm washing approach.
Right.
Actually
exactly.
pioneered in the UK, I understand. And
pioneered in the UK, yeah.
Right.
Whereas in fact now they don't even do it. Now they say
Right.
if you have a 0 viral load, just
Exactly.
go get pregnant. I mean, literally, so it's different. But my point is that if you're an HIV positive intended parent, it does not matter. We and everybody in this industry will also help you have a child.
And I've seen a big difference just in the last 4 years of agencies that really educate their gestational carriers about the process, and not just her, but her family, and helping everybody to take the stigma away from it too, which has been really encouraging.
And exactly, and to your point, I've seen the number of HIV positive parents going this way, and I've seen the number of double embryo transfers going that way.
Exactly. Excellent. Okay. How do they get started with you? I'm going to put up at the end, we will send everybody an email address for you.
Sure, yeah.
You doing video calls or?
Yeah, I mean, basically, unfortunately for my husband, I work every day. I actually worked on Christmas Day. It was quite funny because my husband was snoring on the sofa. My mum was here with the kids. Different story. And these intended parents are like, why are you calling us today? We just sent you an email for a grant. And I'm like, no, it's good. It's because I'm very professional at work. I'm like, no, I'm tearing my hair out. But no, how do people get, I mean, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm, at the clinic. Basically, even if you're not working with SDFC and you've got questions and you're feeling lost or whatever, just send me a message. I'm happy. I help people all over the world, irrespective of what they're doing or who they're doing it with, because nobody helped us. And I know how lonely that feels. And it's a passion of mine.
And I think we connected actually originally through Twitter.
Yeah, we did.
I sent you a message.
We did. Oh, you did.
That's great. Thank you.
It's amazing, isn't it? You're welcome.
I know we could talk and talk and talk, but I think it's been amazing talking to you, and congratulations on your 7-year-olds, nearly 8. Yeah, you're getting into the fun stage.
Oh my God, every stage is fun. Every stage is different, but every stage is fun.
Yeah.
So,
all right, cool. Thanks. We didn't have any questions. I don't know if anybody's got any questions, but you can always email us.
They can always email us.
Okay. Thanks so much, Richard.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.